Do you want to know the best thing about putting in the extra effort to make a great copyrighted work? You can cash in on a sequel. Now, we could talk about the video games that are obvious sequel cash-ins, but that's not what this video is about at all. In fact, it's quite the opposite. We're going to be talking about the sequels that absolutely destroyed their predecessors. The general rule of thumb to have an awesome video game sequel transition is the worse the first game is and the better the second game is, the higher it's going to appear on the list. But as to be expected, it's not that simple. There are plenty of video games on this list where the original is pretty great. There are also other factors such as whether or not you absolutely need to play the original game in order to understand the sequel. Since the definition isn't completely cut and dry, I'm going to be providing additional reasoning as necessary. Hopefully you'll be able to follow along. Number 10 in particular might be a bit tricky.
Number 10.
I tried to find an entry that could kick out Melee to Brawl from my list, but I just couldn't find one. Let me tell you, if you want to stay friends with somebody, you don't discuss religion, you don't discuss politics, and you don't discuss whether you prefer Brawl or Melee. When I said that Melee was a very overrated game, I tried to be as general as possible to make sure that I didn't alienate too many people. Now I'm going to be mentioning specifics, but since this is only number 10, I'm going to try my hardest from getting on a soapbox and instead be brief. An overwhelming majority of people that I have met that say that Melee is better than Brawl say so because they believe that it is better competitively. Two things that these people love to bring up that apparently just breaks the entire game for them is the character balance and tripping. The funny thing is though is that this character balance is based off of an arbitrary rule set that they implement into the game. When you factor in other things such as items and stage hazards, the only character that's overpowered is Meta Knight. Stupid Meta Knight. That aside, if you were to tell me that Team Fortress 2 is a bad game because you believe the classes are completely unbalanced when you use a rule set that bans any type of healing weapon, and then you complain that the medic and engineer are underpowered, I believe I have the right to laugh at you. As for tripping, okay, the amount of games I have seen where that has had an unquestionable effect on the outcome of a match, I can count on one hand. Besides, Brawl has a stronger single-player experience, an online mode that worked well enough with friends, the ability to stack multiple special modes, a larger amount of items, characters, stages, and music, the ability to customize your own stages, the ability to set what frequency a song will appear on a stage, more trophies in the introduction of stickers, smoother animation, diversification of clones such as Ganondorf and Falco, 4 different methods of control, and you disregard the game as inferior because of a roughly 1% chance that your character will fall and you will have to rethink your strategy in a game primarily based around improv. Be reasonable. Other reasons people say that they think Melee is better is because it's faster and has heavier gravity, but I prefer Brawl's physics because it flows better. But really, more than anything, that just comes down to preference. What doesn't come down to preference, however, is a fundamental flaw that Melee has that no one seems to ever mention. Melee's save system is the worst save system I have ever seen in any video game ever. You press start on the title screen, autosave. You exit the character selection menu, autosave. You pick up a new trophy, autosave. You pick up an old trophy, autosave. All of this automatic, non-consensual saving has corrupted my Melee data at least 4 times, and that's a conservative estimate. Sometimes it also infects my other games and then their data's gone too. The saving is so bad that even the developers knew it. In the instruction manual, they tell you to make sure to go to the title screen before you turn the game off. Even when I made sure every time to go back to the title screen, the game would still corrupt itself somehow. I'm not sure if I should be happy that this problem has never occurred in Brawl, because really it should have never occurred in Melee. This is standard stuff we're talking about here. Okay, now that I've lost half my audience, let's move on.
Number 9.
After Super Mario Bros. Was released to much popularity in 1985, Americans were excited to see what could possibly be in its sequel. Instead, what they got was a radical departure from the Super Mario Bros. Formula. Next came Super Mario Bros. 3, complete with unique and vibrant worlds and an inventory. Now I'm aware that this one can be a little weird since Super Mario Bros. 2 in the United States technically isn't Super Mario Bros. 2. But then again, Nintendo seems to reference Super Mario Bros. USA more often than its Japanese counterpart. Shy Guys, Peach Floating, and Birdo have all become part of the Mario canon. In the end, it really doesn't matter whether you are using the United States version or the Japanese version to compare to Super Mario Bros. 3, because Super Mario Bros. 3 completely reinvigorated the Mario formula. It's pretty apparent that this game, and not the Mario games that came before it, became the base for the future 2D Mario games to come. And with all the creativity put in Super Mario Bros. 3, I can't think of another game more worthy of that honor.
Number 8.
This is going to sound ironic, and trust me, it is, but part of what makes a good sequel is how it stands on its own. For an example of what I mean, if a newcomer were to play the sequel and not understand any bit of the story because it's heavily rooted in the original, that's a bad thing. Not only does Infamous 2 summarize what happens in the first game at the very beginning, it deliberately goes out of its way to avoid spoilers for that first game. The gameplay also received a lot of beneficial tweaks. With parkour, Cole now goes exactly where you want him to every time. But perhaps the best change is that the moral system now isn't entirely black and white. In particular, the final karma decision in the game also assesses your value for risk. One decision is clearly more evil than the other, but at least it isn't completely senseless. If I am to be completely honest, I can't think of a single thing that Infamous did that Infamous 2 didn't do better.
Number 7.
I have this problem. You see, I can't ever seem to beat Sonic 1. I blaze through Green Hill Zone, Bear Marble Zone, enjoy Spring Yard Zone, but by Labyrinth Zone I get so bored I have to turn the thing off. Then along came Sonic 2, complete with better zones, Supersonic, the ability to spin dash, and Miles' Tails Prower. God, do I hate Labyrinth Zone. Who even thought it was a good idea?
Number 6.
It only takes one match of Street Fighter to realize why Street Fighter 2 is so much better. With only 2 playable characters and a limited moveset, Street Fighter is just boring, not much else to it. Street Fighter 2, in contrast, has 8 playable characters, many of which are easily memorable by people who have never played Street Fighter. And unlike Ryu and Ken in the first Street Fighter, they aren't just clones of each other. In fact, I'd bet good money that if Street Fighter 2's name were changed to Alley Brawler, nobody would have ever considered that the two games would be related. That experiment might be possible today, however, the original Street Fighter would have to have its name changed to Alley Brawler because let's face it, Street Fighter 2 is much more popular, and for good reason.
Number 5.
The greatest problem with Super Monkey Ball is that a lot of its stages are very similar. Oh, that stage you just beat? You're gonna have to do something like it again, except it will be more curvy and more narrow. Hooray! Super Monkey Ball 2 was more creative in just about every single way ever. Not only did Super Monkey Ball 2 have better and more memorable stages, but it also controlled better for the main game, changed the original 6 party games into something much better than their counterparts, and added 6 new party games on top of that. Hooray!
Number 4.
Whenever I start making a new top 10, I like to do a little bit of research to make sure that I'm not missing any important entries that more than deserve a spot on that list. I was holding off playing the Half-Life franchise until Half-Life 2 Episode 3 was finally announced, but I realized I'd probably be dead before that even happens. Plus, I got the notion that this would be a great entry for my list, so I finally played it, and oh my god, Half-Life is half made. I'm not gonna try to beat around the bush or sugarcoat it. Half-Life is BAD awful, complete with trial and error gameplay, falling through once solid platforms, repetitive enemies, ladder physics that I swear is secretly the main villain, and AI that's door blocking, straight line walking, and shot missing stupid. It's kind of a shame because Half-Life perfectly captured the survivalist vibe, yet it completely messed up everything else. I guess the one blessing I do have is that people don't really talk about this game anymore, and that's thanks to Half-Life 2. While the problems in Half-Life 1 are present in this game, they don't appear anywhere near as frequently as they did in that game, so you can actually lose yourself in the game sometimes. It's debatable whether or not Half-Life 2, Half-Life 2 Episode 1, and Half-Life 2 Episode 2 all count as one game, because while they do run on their own, Valve has not ever gone out of their way to deny that they are one game. Regardless, Half-Life was so mind-numbingly horrible that Half-Life 2 could have been nothing more than Gordon Freeman waking up from his slumber to get a snack and then going back to sleep, and it still would have made this list. Fortunately, that isn't the case, because then we would have never been able to use the gravity gun, where the entire world is your weapon.
Number 3.
I have come to the conclusion that there are 3 integral features to a good Spider-Man game: an open world, realistic swinging, and a combat system worth learning. The first Spider-Man movie game had none of these. Can you guess how many Spider-Man 2 had? In case you magically forgot what this video is about, it's all 3 of them. Really though, like with Infamous 2, Spider-Man 2 beats its predecessor in just about every single thing it ever did. I've never played The Amazing Spider-Man, and I never plan to, because when I heard that your web could stick to clouds again, I immediately lost all interest. There is no such thing as de-evolution, but I gotta say, that comes really close.
Number 2.
It was a tough decision between 2 entries for the number 1 slot, but with all things considered, Portal is still a solid gaming experience, while the other predecessor is mediocre at best. Even so, Portal 2 took the concept of Portal and ran with it. No, scratch that, it didn't run with it. It took a plane and left the country. It added more memorable characters, more goodies to use with your portal gun, and a co-op mode. And it hardly relied on jokes from the previous game, so there's no excuse to keep making cake jokes. Finally, it summarized the events of Portal 1 through graffiti art, but that's not even necessary since the game works pretty well on its own. For an honorable mention, we will be looking at the greatest remake transition of all time, and that is... oh, great. It's Metroid. I don't want to talk about Metroid again. I think it'd be a waste of both of our times if I tore it apart a second time. Someone once told me that they hated Zero Mission because it took out a lot of things from the original Metroid. Hallelujah!
Number 1.
Super Smash Bros. For the 64 was made on a tight budget, and it shows. While it is one of the later games for the system, its presentation is worse than Super Mario 64's, and that was released as a launch title. In the end, it only took a year and a half for something better to come along. Super Smash Bros. Melee completely rendered Smash 64 obsolete, with more representatives from the Nintendo universe and adventure mode, overall much more variety, and new techniques such as side specials and air dodging that remain staples of the franchise to this day. Plus, its presentation is the opposite of that on the N64. Melee's graphics still stand to this day. People may argue about Melee and Brawl for centuries, but if there's one thing on which both parties can agree, it is that the N64 version holds no candle. What do you think is the best sequel transition in video games and why? Let me know in the comments. And by the way, the sequel to this video is going to be similar to Super Mario Bros. USA in the sense that it's going to be a radical departure. Hopefully you'll enjoy it.